Hello everyone, welcome to week 9, and we're going to continue our exploration of P5 DOM in the document object model. Specifically this week, we're going to look at ways that we can target specific elements on a page, and then once we have those elements selected, we can either do stuff like change the styling of them or manipulate them however we'd like, or we can take those elements and reorganize them on the page. So that's what we will do in this week. Originally, we had planned to make DOM just one big giant week, but I think that it's probably better, considering that we have been cranking at a bit of a breakneck pace, to just take it a little bit slow. So hopefully last week was digestible, and this week we'll try to keep it, also pretty easy to digest. So with that, let's go over to the whiteboard, and I will introduce you to a couple of new functions within the P5 DOM library called select and selectAll. As you might guess, what select and selectAll do are select elements for us on the page, and those elements could be specified either by a tag name or a class name or an ID. In the case of select, the select function is different from selectAll. As you may guess, select is just going to return for us one element. And let me just grab them. Let's see here. We can, if you look at this statement here, where I say let my element get the value of select an H1 element, let's say. It could be any element. And we could specify in this parameter area here, in the argument area, I should say, we could specify either an element, like H1, we could specify a class, like, dot my class, or we could specify an ID, like hashtag my ID. Now, if we specify something like an element, there may be more than one. Here I'm specifying H1, but instead of an H1, let's say I said select P for paragraph tag, and there may be 10 paragraphs on our page. What we need to know about the select function is that it's going to return one and only one element. So if we say select P, we are not going to get the whole pile of paragraphs on our page. We're going to get one of them. Specifically, we're going to get the first one. The first one on the page is the one that it's going to find and that it will return for us. In contrast, selectAll does what you think it would. It's going to get the whole pile of paragraphs. So if we say let my elements get the value of selectAll P, what that's going to return is an entire list of paragraphs, an entire array of paragraphs, right? Same kind of array that we've dealt with in the past couple of weeks. We're going to be able to traverse that array, index through it, and make changes to it just like we would with any other array. So that's an important distinction. Understanding the difference between when to use select or when to use selectAll. And I'm going to go through this obviously in code in just a couple of minutes to give you some real world examples. But one other thing that I will show you, I'm going to show you in code, but I at least thought it was worth mentioning here on the whiteboard as well, is that we're going to explore yet another method available to us in the P5 DOM. Like last week we used position as a method on P5 element objects, right? DOM objects. Well, this week we're going to use the style method. And style, as you probably think, it's going to allow us to do CSS styling to elements that we select. So we might grab a paragraph on the screen and we may say, I want that paragraph to be red, or I want that paragraph to do something else. And because this is P5, that something else can be something that's kind of an unconventional thing. So as we go through this P5 DOM exercise, which is a very standard kind of a JavaScript thing. You know, if you were learning plain JavaScript right now, we would be talking about things like document.getElements by tag name or document.getElement by ID. The P5 analog to that is select or selectAll. But you know, when you're a regular front-end developer or something, you grab an element and then you might style it, change the color or something. But we're in P5, so you could do things like, you know, spin it around or fade it in and out or make it big or small or have it interact with your mouse or have it interact with whatever else you might decide. And that's kind of the spirit that we want to think about this. You know, don't think of your web page as a piece of paper in this class. Think about the web page as, oh, it'd be kind of nice if I could break this web page in some very creative and artistic ways by just taking these DOM elements and, you know, doing stuff with them, animating them or whatever you guys decide. So I'm going to show you pretty straightforward examples, but, you know, keep thinking about that. All right. So the .style method, how does that work? You can see here in the syntax, I've got, you know, my element. Let's say I selected an element up here. Let my element get the selection of H1 or whatever. And then I want to style my element. So my element.style might have as its arguments one set of key value pairs. Let's say I just want to change the font size to 12 pixels. So I could say my element.style font size in quotes, comma, 12 pixels. So there's a key value pair there. Okay, that's how the style method works. But if we wanted to, instead of just passing one CSS statement to it, like, you know, font size 12 pixels, color red, font weight bold or something like that, we could chain them together. And the syntax is just a little bit different there. We would say my element.style parentheses in quotes, and then you would just script it like a conventional CSS. You say color colon red semicolon, font size, colon, 12 pixels, semicolon, font weight, colon, bold, semicolon. And you could chain all of those CSS statements together in one call to the style method. So that's enough whiteboard talk. Hopefully you've got an understanding of how select and selectAll differ. But as always, the best way to show you is with real world code. So let's do that. Okay, here I am in week 9.1, right? We've got a folder with an index.html and a sketch.js. Before I dig into the sketch, I'm just going to show you that in our HTML document, I've pre-populated a couple of things here that we can play with. I have an H1 element that just gives, you know, we're using the select and selectAll functions today. So there's an H1 element that we could manipulate. And then I have 4 paragraphs. You notice that I have this list of paragraphs, paragraph 1, paragraph 2, which I've given an ID tag of my ID. So it's got an ID tag associated with it. I have paragraph 3, which is just free of any classes or IDs. And then I have a 4th paragraph, which I'm actually going to get rid of this ID because it didn't really belong there. You're only allowed one ID on a page if you don't already know that. But I am going to have a paragraph with a class of special. So actually, you know what I'm going to do just to keep things interesting is I am going to have 2 paragraphs with a class of special. You can have as many elements contain the same class as you would like on a page, but you may only have one ID. Okay, so we have 1 paragraph that doesn't have anything. We have 1 paragraph that has an ID. And then we have 2 paragraphs that carry the class of special. All right. Okay, over to our sketch.js file. I am going to, right out of the gates, I'm going to declare a couple of variables that are going to hold the elements that we gather from the DOM. So I've got one variable that I've just assigned as my selection, and that's going to hold our selection. And then as we get into the selectAll statement in a couple of minutes, I've got another one called my selections with an S on the end that's going to hold the array that we capture. All right. Just very quickly in Canvas, in setup, you'll see that I have no canvas this time. I'm not drawing a canvas. If you don't specify a canvas, it will automatically make a 100 by 100 pixel canvas for you. So if you don't want a canvas, you have to specifically say no canvas. We don't need one this time around, so I'm saying no canvas. I don't know what. Oh, I had something. I'm reusing codes. We don't need to fill and draw anything because we're not using a canvas. Don't mind me. This was code from last year. All right, so just take a look here in setup of what we're doing. Right out of the gates, I am going to take our variable mySelection, and I'm going to assign it the value of select P, right? And I'm not even going to do anything with styling yet. I'm just going to go over to our code, and I am going to show you that we have these 4 paragraphs on the page, just like my index.html showed you. I have applied no styling. At this point in code, I'll just pop open the console too. See, I have live reload enabled in our local server, but nothing's happening. So I have an element selected, but I haven't done anything with it yet. Okay, so let's do that. I am going to uncomment line 20, and you'll see that now that I have this variable with a paragraph assigned to it, I am going to invoke that .style method on it. Say mySelection.style color, comma, red. All right. Save that up. Go back to our page, and how about that? We now have a paragraph highlighted in red. You will notice that I selected up here in line 15, I selected paragraph, right? So I didn't say select all P, I said select P. What that returns for you, once again, if you have more than one of an element on a page, it's only going to return one element. It's going to return the very first one that it finds. So you see on our page that the very first paragraph that it found is the one that it sent back, and that's the one that we colored. Okay? So that's kind of fun, but what if instead of just coloring the text in red, we wanted to do a couple of different CSS properties at once? We wanted to style with a few different things at once. We could use that slight modification to the syntax that I talked about, where we could say color red semicolon, right? So it's just like a regular CSS scripting. Font size 20 pixels semicolon, font weight bold. All right, so saving that, you'll see that we've now got all 3 of those properties applied to our element style. All right. As I mentioned, this is P5. This is not your father's jQuery class. So we could do some stuff. We could leverage, for example, the draw loop that's given to us for free in P5, and we could do something like up here. Let's declare a global variable called angle, which is going to hold the value of an angle that we want to increment somehow. So we're going to take this selection of ours, in this case a paragraph of text, and we're going to rotate it around on the page. So we could do that. And now that we have our angle defined, we could do something like mySelection.style, and there's a CSS property for rotate that we could rotate by what? By an angle. And then each time through our draw loop, we could increment that angle by 1 degree, and then let's see what we got. Okay, let me close it. So now we've got this, we've got this paragraph that refuses to behave. And I wouldn't necessarily call this creative, but I hope this gives you a warm, fuzzy feeling that you do not have to respect the web page as a document, but instead treat it like it's just a different canvas that happens to contain letters and numbers instead of our P5 HTML5 canvas. We can use the DOM as our sketch tool as well. We can do some more stuff where, let's say, instead of doing this rotation thing, we could do something where I'm now connecting the font size in our style to the mouse X position, right? And I'm saying font size, comma, mouse X plus PX. So I'm feeding it the style of whatever my mouse X value is, that's going to be the size of my font in pixels. Okay, so let's do that. And that's not working. What's going on? What did I do there? Okay, sorry about that. I I hadn't saved, I guess, because I just went back and checked and everything looks fine. So again, coupling the font size to the mouse. Whoops, sorry. Okay, yeah, check it out. So now I'm moving my mouse left to right. And of course, we could map this such that, you know, the width of the page is controlled a little bit more normally, but you can see here that if I move the X, I'm making these font sizes really, really big really quickly. So that's the kind of stuff that we can do with P5 pretty easily. Okay, so back over to Atom. I'm going to shut this down, and I'm going to direct our attention, instead of the select now, let's take a look at selecting all of the elements on a page. Right. Oh, actually, no. You know what? Before I do that, let me do a couple of things with select. Let's just make this back to red, just to make things easier. So instead of using, you know, we were using on line 15 here, we were using select P as you know, a tag, an element that we were selecting via its tag name, but we could instead select using either a class or an ID. So this time around, we'll go through our selection process by using the class name of special. And we specify that syntactically by including the dot for the class name and then the name of the class special. All right. So I'm going to save that. And just to remind you, paragraphs 3 and 4 are our special classes. Okay, we go over here and you will see what happened. We have paragraph 3 and 4 selected as special, but remember, select only gives us what? It only gives us back one returned element, and it's the first one. So in this case, we got element 3 returned. Okay. Okay, so instead of using a class selector, why don't we use an ID this time around, which we will specify via the hashtag, #, my ID. Save that. And remember, paragraph 2 is the one with an ID, I think, unless I didn't name it correctly. Let's check me again. I'm having a great day today. Let's see. ID equals my ID. That. Oh, yeah, it would help if I say my selection, wouldn't it? See? Errors are everywhere. Okay, it works. We're back in business. I had misspelled my variable. So there you go. So we have beat that horse pretty dead. All right. Now, instead of using select, let's go through the same exercise with select all. And you'll notice that there are a couple of things that we need to be aware of with select all. Okay, we are going to, this time around, grab all the paragraphs, right? And why don't we just quickly try to do something like, you know, we've got this variable called my selections with an S, and it's going to be all of our paragraphs. I'm going to say my selections.style color, comma, red. And you might think this would work, but it's not going to. I'll prove it that, you know, we don't have anything happening here. Matter of fact, if we pop open our console, yep, we in fact do have an error. And I'm going to show you what this error says. If I can zoom in over here. Okay. I don't think that my screen capture likes to zoom very well, but hopefully you guys can see this. You'll see uncaught type error. My selections.style is not a function. Now that error is a little bit cryptic, but what it means is that we have this object that we've just selected, right? My selections, and that object does not have a method called .style. Why is that? Well, if you think about it, let's in our console here, I type my selections and it returns for me what is my selections. My selections is not a P5 element, it's an array. See, it's an array with 4 elements. And each of those indices in my array, each of my array indices contains a P5 element. That's the object that has a .style property, not an array. Okay? So we've got an array we have to traverse through that array. We have to index through that array, just like we did in weeks past when we had an array of objects. Okay, so let's do that. So it's pretty easy. We'll just uncomment this line because we know that's not going to work. So instead, let's iterate through that array. And how do we do that? We know that arrays have their own handy property of .length. So we can just go through every element in our array from 0 to the end of it. And then what we'll do here is we'll take my selections index I and then apply the style method to it. Okay? So we can go through every element that we've got and then apply these style values. So now if I save this up, there you have it. So now I've applied the style to each element in the array. But you have to traverse it. You can't just apply styles to an array. It's not going to work. So that is selectAll, and style in P5. From here, what we're going to explore is a little bit more about how we can take an element like our canvas, for example, which in the early weeks we wanted to say, oh, can we take our canvas and move it up to the top of the page and then put our copy beneath it, our HTML copy beneath it. We can do that using the parent and child relationships that we can explore in the DOM and using the parent and child functions in P5.